I go back to your lecture, and you talked about compassion of recognition, compassion of understanding, compassion of truth. Find it in ourselves first. So I'm going to ask a very difficult one. October 7th, when the horrible massacre happened in Israel, where young children were murdered, burned, babies in ovens.
That didn't happen. There were no babies in ovens.
Oh, yes, they were.
No, there weren't. That's been refuted even by the Israelis.
There were.
No, there weren't.
There were.
There were no babies in ovens.
Well,
but let's agree. Hold on. Let's agree on what we do agree on. Okay, a horrible massacre happened. People were killed in their homes. Civilians
were killed. Were raped.
Stay with. No, look, let's agree there was bad enough without adding stuff to it. Okay. Now I'm telling you, there's been no evidence of mass deliberate rapes. No such evidence.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry. There's no such evidence.
Oh, yes, of course there was.
No, there isn't.
There was a woman in the United Nations that came to Israel and did the research and brought those evidence to the United Nations.
I'll let you finish your question.
My question is, how do I find compassion for these people?
Which people?
The animals that did that.
The animals that did that. I get your point of view, okay? In your point of view, everything you read actually happened the way you've read it. Hold on a second. I'm telling you what I understand your point of view to is. There was mass rapes, children beheaded, put into ovens, so on. Okay, now, objectively, I'm telling you, I looked at all the evidence I could. There were horrible massacres. Let's agree on that, okay? There were hostages, including young children and elderly people, civilians that should never have been captured, that were taken into captivity. Let's agree on that, okay? On the specific issues of babies in ovens and mass rapes, you and I are not going to agree, because I looked at evidence that you haven't looked at. But hold on a second. Let's just agree on what we do agree on, okay? And then let's take your question. How do we have compassion for these animals? Well, I'm not going to get into a big political rant here, but I'll tell you what I think very quickly, okay? If I saw the world from the perspective that you see the world from, I would 100% agree with you. But that's not how I see the world, number one. Number two, I've been to Palestine. 2.5 years ago, I went there to work with Palestinian women who've been tortured in Israeli jails, which has been documented by Israeli Physicians for Human Rights, by B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization, by United Nations and others. Nobody ever talks about the thousands of Palestinians. Did you know that 2 Palestinian doctors were tortured to death recently by Israel? Doctors tortured to death. Now my question to you is, and I'm not going to go into the history, this is not the place for it. But I have a different view of the history. I used to see it the way you do. I don't anymore. I'm not going to go into how I do see the history, because this is not the... Just let me finish. Honest to God, I'll give you the last word, I promise you. I do promise to give it, okay? History did not begin on October the 7th. And here's what I know. In Canada, 4 years ago, there was a poll, a national poll. Now, thousands of children died in those schools. People were tortured, raped, all kinds of stuff. Not even controversial. There was a poll in Canada. 70% of Canadians 4 years ago said they knew nothing or little about the residential schools. 70% of Canadians knew nothing or little about the residential schools. So what happened to Indigenous people? If you do a poll in the United States based on all the Hollywood movies that people have seen, until very few years ago, and even now, most people will know nothing about what happened to the Indigenous people here. Nothing. The genocide, the torture, the rape, the starvation. They know nothing about it. And in some states in the United States, it's illegal to even to teach it in the schools. Now, do you think the average Jew knows anything about the indigenous people of Palestine? No, just a second. So, these animals that you talk about, the first massacre of Palestinians in Gaza didn't happen last year. Didn't even happen 4 or 5 years ago when they killed hundreds of children with their bombs. It happened in 1956. But just a second. In 1956, they massacred 200 civilians. Do you know about it? You've never heard of it. Of course you haven't heard of it. That's why you can call them animals. Otherwise, you'd see them like human beings like the rest of us. Anyway, I'm done. Go ahead. Yeah.
So human beings can murder and rape and maim and cut breasts of women, that's okay?
No, it's not okay.
Well, that's
Did I
that's
say-
the
did-
message you're giving.
Did I say it was okay?
That's the message you're giving. That's the claps
Okay,
I'm hearing.
how many of you heard me say that it's okay to rape and kill people? Raise your hands.
I will finish with one thing.
By the
There
way-
is a Nova.
By the way,
there
how
is
do
a Nova.
you feel about the rapes of Palestinian women by the Israeli army in 1948?
That's a false.
No, it's not.
Yes, it
No,
is.
it's not.
Yes, it is.
You know what? You want to believe me? Read the Israeli historians.
Well,
I
we'll
can give you
differ
the
in our
names.
opinions. I lived it.
No, I can give
I
you.
lived it.
I
I
can
lived
give
in
you.
Ashkelon.
I can give you the names
Let
of
me
the.
tell you one thing. In United States, we teach kids. I'm sorry. You will let me finish. In United States, we teach kids how to be in fire alarm.
Okay, I'm done. This is what
Let's-
happens, people. Is you and I don't live in the same world. But let me tell you one thing. This is not about you and I, okay? There was a Jewish survivor of the Holocaust called Edith Egger. Have you ever heard of her? Okay, she's a therapist here in California. She was on the same train to Auschwitz as my grandparents. Okay, okay, I'm telling you something now, okay? I'm not debating with you anymore. You and I don't live in the same world. We don't. You're a good person, good heart. We don't live in the same world. Just let me finish. Edith was on the same train to Auschwitz as my grandparents. Her parents were on the same train. My grandparents didn't survive. Her parents didn't survive either. She did. And at some point in her book called The Choice, which is worth reading, she goes back to Berghof, I think, which is Hitler's lair in the Bavarian Alps. And she goes back there to forgive Hitler, okay? And she says, not because it's okay what Hitler did, but because I didn't want to keep him imprisoned in my heart anymore. So I'm not here to preach forgiveness, but I'm telling you, that place where we call other people animals, if you want to live there, that's your choice. I don't want to live there. I want to understand people. I want to understand what happened to them. I want to know why they behaved the way they behaved. I'm not into justifying taking civilian hostages. I said that was unjustifiable. Why you didn't hear me, I don't know. I said there were massacres that shouldn't have happened. Why you didn't hear me, I don't know. You know why you didn't hear me? Because you live in a bubble, that's why. Anyway. Anybody, by the way, wants to know about my visit to the occupied territories, there's a film online you can watch called Where the Olive Trees Weep. This is difficult. This is really difficult. It's difficult because this debate has been going on in the Jewish community for over 100 years now. Not that you know that, but it has been going on for 100 years. It's going on especially right now. And you can see how, whether I'm right, whether my friend here is right, whether neither of us are right, just how big the feelings are. And it's even for people of goodwill like you and I. And I know you respect me. You wouldn't be here otherwise. You know, it's so difficult to communicate. It's so difficult. By the way, before I go on, I need to say something. I apologize to you, okay? You're asking a question, and I allowed myself to get triggered and get into an argument with you. So I apologize to all of you. It's an example, it's an issue I lived with all my life.